My kids refused to fund my life-saving operation. So I used my pension to buy the hospital where they worked. The digital glow of the tablet screen cast an icy pallor over Elara Vesper's serene face, mirroring the chill that had just settled deep within her 78-year-old heart. Her fingers, still elegant despite their age, trembled almost imperceptibly as they hovered over the message she had just received. "Mother," Kaylin's text began, devoid of any warmth, "Serafina and I have discussed your situation. While we sympathize, we believe it's time you utilized your own substantial pension or investments for such significant expenses. We simply aren't in a position to assist with something of this magnitude at the moment. Our own financial commitments are considerable." Elara reread the words, each one a sharp, precise cut. Substantial pension. Not in a position. The diagnosis had been stark, a rare, aggressive form of heart valve disease. The surgery, groundbreaking and immensely complex, was her only chance. The cost, a staggering sum that would indeed deplete a significant portion of what they believed was her pension, a modest allowance she had set aside for herself after years of pouring her true wealth into their lives. For decades, her own needs had been secondary, her personal comfort sacrificed in the ceaseless pursuit of their happiness, their success, their lavish ease. Yet, her children, the very people she had devoted her vast resources to, saw her life-threatening need as nothing more than an inconvenient financial request. A deep, hollow ache resonated in her chest, a pain that transcended the physical ailment, striking at the very core of her being. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Elara's lips, a smile utterly devoid of mirth, chilling in its quiet resolve. For years, she had yearned for love, for respect, for a genuine connection with her only son and his wife. For years, she had paid for it, bought it, nurtured it, only to be met with cold calculation and thinly veiled disdain. This message, this final, callous dismissal, was not merely a rejection of a financial plea, it was a wholesale repudiation of her worth, her love, her very existence beyond her bank accounts. The bar had not just been lowered, it had been utterly removed. The line had not just been crossed, it had been obliterated. And in that moment, a quiet storm brewed within Elara. A storm not of tears, but of steel. A clarity, sharp and uncompromising, descended upon her, illuminating the barren landscape of her relationships. The weight of her past sacrifices, once borne with quiet hope, now felt like a crushing burden of self-deception. The roots of this profound disconnect stretched back decades, entwined with the immense fortune Elara had inherited upon the passing of her beloved husband, Alistair. Alistair, a visionary in renewable energy, had built an empire from the ground up, a sprawling conglomerate that spanned continents and innovated groundbreaking technologies. He had been a man of immense foresight, meticulously managing his wealth, not just for personal gain, but with a deep sense of responsibility. His death, a sudden, tragic accident, had left Elara not just a widow but the custodian of an almost unfathomable wealth, a legacy he had intended to empower her and their family for generations. For Elara, however, this wealth was never merely about accumulation, it was a tool for love, a means to ensure the happiness and success of her son, Kaylin, her sole surviving family. She had carried Alistair's memory with her like a precious, fragile thing, convinced that by providing Kaylin with every advantage, she was honoring her husband's legacy and securing a bright, prosperous future for their lineage. Kaylin, a brilliant but equally entitled young man, had always dreamt of becoming a leading surgeon. From a young age, he had displayed a keen intellect, but also an alarming ease with expecting things to be handed to him. Elara remembered countless instances, a rare, vintage comic book he insisted he needed, a private tutor because he found a subject tedious, or the sudden demand for an expensive sports car upon receiving his driver's license. Each time, Elara, desperate to see his joy, to feel his fleeting appreciation, had acquiesced. She had not just supported his dream of medicine, she had paved the golden path. His undergraduate education at an Ivy League university, followed by the grueling, prohibitively expensive medical school, was entirely funded by Elara. She remembered the monthly transfers, the tuition bills that ran into hundreds of thousands, the lavish allowance she sent him for his opulent apartment in a trendy city neighborhood, and a social life far beyond what any medical student needed. He had hosted extravagant parties, flown first class for weekend getaways, and amassed an enviable collection of luxury watches, all on her dime. Elara had justified it to herself. He was brilliant, he was working hard, he deserved the best. When Kaylin met Serafina, a sharp, ambitious woman who quickly saw the advantages of aligning herself with the Vesper family's wealth, Elara had embraced her with open arms, hoping for a larger, more loving family. Serafina was beautiful, articulate, and seemed to possess an unshakable confidence that Elara admired. Elara had paid for their extravagant wedding, a multi-million-dollar affair in a Tuscan villa, complete with Michelin-starred catering, a renowned Italian tenor, and a guest list that read like a who's who of high society. Elara had personally overseen every detail, hoping the shared experience of planning such a joyous event would forge a bond with Serafina. Yet, Serafina's gratitude had been fleeting, quickly replaced by a quiet expectation for the next grand gesture. Their first home, a sprawling mansion in the most exclusive part of the city, had been purchased with a hefty down payment from Elara, followed by years of her quietly covering their exorbitant property taxes, maintenance costs, and even the salaries of their household staff. Kaylin, always quick to complain about his modest surgeon's salary, despite it being well into six figures, would often lament the burden of their mortgage, hinting, never explicitly asking, until Elara, out of a desperate desire to alleviate his stress, would step in. She had gifted them luxury cars, a new Mercedes-Benz for Kaylin's commute to the hospital and a Range Rover for Serafina, replaced every few years with the latest model, always with Elara's funds. Each new car was met with a perfunctory thank you, or sometimes a critique of the color or interior, rather than genuine appreciation. Serafina, meanwhile, had her own aspirations. She dabbled in various entrepreneurial ventures, each one more ill-conceived than the last, and each one meticulously financed by Elara. There was the boutique organic coffee shop that lasted less than a year, closing due to unforeseen competition after Elara had invested nearly $1 million. Then came the high-end dog grooming salon that closed due to lack of suitable clientele, another $500,000 gone. Finally, the online luxury fashion aggregator that never quite launched, absorbing millions more of Elara's capital. For each failure, Serafina would express profound regret, never offering to repay Elara, only lamenting the unforeseen market challenges, and then, subtly, hinting at a new, even more ambitious project that, of course, required a fresh injection of capital. Elara, desperate to see Serafina succeed, to feel like a valued part of their lives, to believe her investments were not entirely in vain, always acquiesced. She longed for Serafina to confide in her, to share a genuine triumph, but such moments never came. The grandchildren, twins named Oliver and Willow, were the apple of Elara's eye, and her generosity towards them knew no bounds. She believed, with a fierce maternal hope, that by showering them with opportunities, she could indirectly connect with her son and daughter-in-law, that the children would bridge the growing chasm. They attended the most prestigious private schools, their tuition fees rivaling college expenses. Elara funded their private tutors, their equestrian lessons, their elite music academies, their summer camps in Switzerland. She bought them the latest gadgets, designer clothes, and planned elaborate, all-expenses-paid family vacations to the Maldives, the Alps, and the Caribbean, always ensuring Kaylin and Serafina traveled first class and stayed in the most opulent suites. She loved them fiercely, believing that by lavishing them with opportunities, she was securing their future and, by extension, cementing her place in their lives. Yet, even with the children, the connection felt superficial. They would give her a quick hug, eyes already drifting towards the new toy or adventure she had provided, before being whisked away by their parents. But the love and respect she craved remained elusive. Elara became a financial resource, a walking ATM. Calls from Kaylin would begin with a perfunctory, "How are you, mother?" before quickly pivoting to a slight financial hiccup or an unforeseen investment opportunity. Serafina would visit, offering superficial compliments about Elara's decor, before subtly lamenting the cost of a new designer bag she simply had to have, or a renovation project for their pool house. Elara was rarely invited to family dinners unless it was a formal affair where her presence, and implied wealth, was a status symbol. She was excluded from spontaneous gatherings, from intimate moments with her grandchildren. Her birthday was often marked by a hurried phone call and an expensive, impersonal gift. Her opinions were dismissed, her advice ignored. She often overheard snippets of their conversations, hushed tones discussing mother's latest eccentricity or how much she's worth. A chill would run down her spine with each overheard phrase, confirming her deepest fears. She was merely a means to an end. A particularly painful memory resurfaced with vivid clarity, a Christmas Eve dinner years ago. Elara had spent weeks meticulously planning and preparing a traditional feast, hoping for a warm, intimate family evening. She had set the table with her finest china, arranged fresh flowers, and personally baked her grandmother's traditional plum pudding. Kaylin and Serafina arrived late, dressed in glittering attire for a more glamorous party they were attending immediately after. They ate quickly, distracted by their phones, barely engaging with Elara or the children. Kaylin, after barely touching his food, had casually mentioned, "Oh, mother, the winter maintenance on the boat is due. That's always a hefty one, isn't it?" Referring to the yacht Elara had bought them years prior. Elara, heartbroken by their disinterest in her efforts, by their palpable eagerness to leave, had simply nodded, her throat tight with unshed tears, and later transferred the significant sum. It was then she realized that her presence was tolerated, even desired, only when it served a financial purpose. Her heart ached with the silent burden of their ingratitude. Each time she felt the familiar pang of being used, she would rationalize it, telling herself that their happiness was her happiness, that their success was her legacy. But the gnawing emptiness grew larger with each passing year, each unreturned call, each dismissive glance. The mansion, once a symbol of her prosperity, had become a gilded cage, trapping her in a cycle of unfulfilled longing. The recent health crisis had brought this underlying dynamic to a brutal head. The doctor had been clear, "Mrs. Vesper, this surgery is critical. Without it, your prognosis is grim. It's a complex procedure, and the cost, it is substantial." Elara, usually stoic, had felt a flicker of hope. Surely, now, they would see her vulnerability, her need. Surely, they would recognize the years of unwavering support. The phone call to Kaylin had been difficult, her voice softer than usual, tinged with a plea she rarely allowed herself. She had recounted the doctor's words, the gravity of her situation, the terrifying prognosis. Kaylin had listened, his tone clinically detached, offering platitudes about modern medicine, before promising to discuss it with Serafina. The text message had followed, a cold, calculated dagger to her already fragile heart. It was then that the dam of unspoken grievances, of years of quiet resentment, finally, irrevocably, burst. A profound sense of disillusionment, sharp and absolute, washed over her. The illusion she had painstakingly maintained for decades shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The morning after the chilling text, Elara Vesper awoke with a clarity she hadn't known in decades. The familiar ache in her chest, a physical manifestation of her failing heart, was overshadowed by a new, more profound determination. She bypassed her usual elegant breakfast in the sunroom, where she often sipped delicate teas and read the financial papers, instead moving directly to her study, a sanctuary filled with books and antique maps. The room, usually a place for quiet contemplation, now felt charged with a new energy. Her hands, steady now, reached for the antique rotary phone, a nostalgic piece she kept for its satisfying weight and the deliberate act of dialing. She did not need her glasses to recall the number, etched into her memory, that of her longtime private banker, Mr. Sterling. Their professional relationship spanned over 40 years, a testament to his discretion and her family's enduring wealth. "Sterling," she stated calmly when he answered, his voice a familiar, reassuring rumble, accustomed to her late husband's and now her own, usually less decisive, calls. "It's Elara Vesper. I need you to initiate a series of immediate financial actions." Her voice, though quiet, carried an unmistakable resonance of authority, a tone he hadn't heard from her in years, not since Alistair's passing. She instructed him to freeze all recurring payments to Kaylin and Serafina Vesper, effective immediately. Every allowance, every bill payment, every property tax contribution, every car lease payment, every school tuition, all of it, halted. She provided a detailed list, each item a memory of a sacrifice she had made, now to be rescinded. Her mind scrolled through a mental ledger of decades of their unchecked consumption, the true cost of their modest lives. Furthermore, Mr. Sterling, she continued, her gaze fixed on a faded photograph of Alistair on her desk, his kind eyes seeming to look upon her with silent approval, I want to revoke all power of attorney granted to my son, Caelan Vesper, and his wife, Serafina Vesper. All access to my accounts, all financial oversight, is to be terminated. Immediately. I will manage my affairs directly from this point forward. Sterling, a man of discreet professionalism, detected the steel beneath her composure, the unyielding resolve that brooked no argument. He did not question, merely confirmed, understood, Mrs. Vesper. I'll action these changes immediately. Is there anything else? Elara paused, a slow, deliberate breath filling her lungs, a sense of quiet power expanding within her. Yes, Mr. Sterling. There is one more thing. I need you to identify a suitable acquisition target for me. A large, prestigious private hospital. One that caters to the elite, perhaps one with a strong research department and a reputation for excellence in surgery and administration. She paused again, allowing the full weight of her words to settle, picturing the institution that dominated her son's professional life. Specifically, I am interested in a hospital where Caelan Vesper is a leading surgeon, and Serafina Vesper holds a significant administrative position. I want to buy it. Discreetly, and with immediate effect. Prepare the necessary due diligence and tender a compelling offer. I want this to be a rapid, decisive transaction. Sterling, for the first time in their long professional relationship, hesitated. A low murmur of surprise escaped him. Mrs. Vesper, such an acquisition, it would be an immense undertaking. It would require a substantial portion of your liquid assets. And the logistical complexities, the regulatory hurdles, the sheer scale of such a venture. His voice trailed off, a hint of concern entering his usually unflappable tone. I understand the magnitude, Sterling, Elara interrupted, her voice unwavering, a quiet force of nature. And I assure you, I have considered it thoroughly. My liquid assets are more than sufficient. I want this done. No delays. No complications. Just make it happen. Sterling, recognizing the unshakable resolve in her voice, the chilling certainty in her request, knew better than to argue. This was not a whim, this was a woman who had reached her breaking point and was now wielding her power with surgical precision. Very well, Mrs. Vesper. I will commence immediately. You'll hear from me by the end of the day. The call ended, and Elara sat for a moment, the phone still in her hand, feeling a strange mixture of exhilaration and righteous fury. Meanwhile, across town, Caelan and Serafina were beginning to experience the first, unsettling tremors of Elara's quiet revolution. Serafina was at a high-end boutique, attempting to purchase a new designer handbag, a limited edition, emerald green Birkin she had been coveting for months. Her platinum credit card, usually waived with such careless abandon, was declined. Insufficient funds, the sales assistant murmured apologetically, her eyes darting away, recognizing Serafina Vesper and her usual extravagant purchases. Serafina, mortified, tried another card, then another, each one meeting the same humiliating fate. Her face, usually composed and elegantly impassive, flushed with a mixture of anger and disbelief. There must be some mistake, she snapped, grabbing her phone to call her bank. But the bank's automated message informed her of a temporary hold on her accounts, citing unusual activity without further explanation. The humiliation was immediate and public. Hours later, the tremors became more pronounced. Caelan, arriving home from the hospital, his mind still replaying a particularly demanding surgery, found Serafina in a furious state, pacing the marble floors of their lavish living room, her normally perfect coiffure slightly disheveled. Caelan, something is terribly wrong, she exclaimed, her voice shrill with panic. All my cards are being declined. The bank says there are no funds. And the transfer for Oliver's equestrian competition fees bounced. His coach just called. Kalen frowned, his irritation from the hospital fading into a growing sense of unease. What are you talking about? Mother usually handles all that. Did you call her? I tried. She's not answering. And our house manager just called, saying the landscapers refused to work because their last payment bounced. And the electric bill is apparently overdue. They're threatening to cut us off. Serafina's voice rose with each revelation, bordering on hysteria, her carefully constructed facade of effortless wealth crumbling. Their carefully constructed world, built entirely on Alara's financial largesse, was beginning to show cracks. Kalen pulled out his own wallet, a flicker of cold unease in his eyes. He tried to pay for his preferred brand of artisanal coffee at his usual cafe, and his card, too, was declined. This is absurd, he muttered, trying to keep his composure, dismissing the sales assistant's apologetic look. He remembered Alara's call about her surgery, his dismissive text. A cold knot formed in his stomach. Could it be? No, his mother was too soft, too dependent on their approval to ever cut them off. It had to be a technical glitch, a bank error. It had to be. Over the next 2 days, the glitches multiplied, evolving into a full-blown financial crisis. The concierge service that booked their flights and dinner reservations called to say their membership was suspended due to unresolved payments. The payment for their children's elite private school tuition bounced, and the headmaster's office called, a stern woman informing Serafina that Oliver and Willow would not be permitted to attend classes until the arrears were settled. The lease on Kalen's Mercedes was flagged for non-payment, and a polite but firm notice arrived, threatening repossession. Their personal assistant, whose salary Alara had always covered, informed them he could no longer work without payment. Their grand, opulent lifestyle, once so effortlessly maintained, was crumbling around them, piece by agonizing piece. The panic was no longer a distant threat, it was a cold, suffocating reality. They tried calling Alara repeatedly, their initial annoyance morphing into a desperate, frantic need. Her phone went straight to voicemail. They drove to her elegant mansion, their Range Rover feeling suddenly less impressive, only to be politely informed by the new security guard, a formidable man Alara had recently hired, with a demeanor that suggested he would tolerate no nonsense, that Mrs. Vesper was unavailable and not accepting visitors. His eyes were impassive, betraying no hint of recognition of their former unchallenged access. Panic began to set in, raw and undeniable. This wasn't a glitch. This was deliberate. And it was Alara. The woman they had dismissed as frail, as a resource, as a mere fixture in their lives, was orchestrating their downfall. The pristine, manicured lawns of Alara's mansion glittered under the late morning sun, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside Kalen and Serafina as they pulled up to the imposing gates. Their faces were a mixture of fury, desperation, and a lingering sense of disbelief, their once impeccable attire now seeming to mock their internal disarray. The security guard, the formidable Mr. Henderson, met them with an impassive stare, his presence a clear boundary they had never encountered before. Mr. and Mrs. Vesper, he greeted, his voice calm but firm, a subtle warning in his tone. Mrs. Vesper is aware of your visit. She will see you. For precisely 20 minutes. And you are to remain composed. He opened the gates just wide enough for their car to pass, the silent message clear. They were guests, on sufferance, not family, their past privileges entirely revoked. They parked in the circular driveway, the familiar grandeur of the house now feeling alien, even hostile. They found Alara in her study, seated at her polished mahogany desk, a cup of herbal tea steaming beside her, a book of poetry open next to it. She looked utterly serene, her silver hair impeccably coiffed, her silk robe draped elegantly. Her gaze, however, held a new, unyielding depth, a quiet power that seemed to emanate from her very being. Mother, what is the meaning of this? Kalen burst out, abandoning any pretense of decorum. His carefully curated surgeon's composure had utterly fractured, his voice strained with a mixture of anger and humiliation. My cards are being declined. Serafina's cards are being declined. The school just called. Our staff are leaving. This is madness. Our entire lives are falling apart. Serafina, usually the more calculating and composed of the two, was equally undone, her eyes wide with a frantic disbelief. Elara, how could you do this to us? To your own son? To your grandchildren? Do you know what this is doing to our reputation? To our lives? Her voice was a strained, desperate plea, laced with a familiar undercurrent of accusation, as if Elara were the one in the wrong. Elara raised a hand, a gesture of quiet authority that stopped them mid-sentence, her movements slow and deliberate. Sit down, Kaylin. Serafina. We need to talk, truly talk, for the first time in a very long while. Her voice was soft, yet it carried an undeniable weight. They slumped into the fauteuils opposite her desk, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and rage, their bodies tense with suppressed frustration. You ask what the meaning of this is, Elara began, her voice soft, almost a whisper, yet it cut through the air with the sharpness of a razor. It means, my dear children, that the tap has run dry. The well from which you have drawn without thought, without gratitude, without a single moment of genuine concern for the hand that filled your cups, is now empty. For you, at least. Kaylin scoffed, a nervous, disbelieving sound. Empty? Mother, we know your husband left you an empire. You have more money than you could ever spend. This is absurd. An empire I have spent, Kaylin, Elara countered, her eyes holding his, unwavering. An empire I poured into your dreams, your desires, your insatiable appetites. Do you remember when you decided you simply must have that vintage Ferrari, the one that cost more than most people's homes, simply because a colleague had a newer model? And when I hesitated, expressing a mild concern about the cost, you told me I was holding you back from achieving your full potential, that a man of your stature needed to project success? I bought it for you, Kaylin. Just as I paid for your exorbitant medical school tuition, your lavish apartment, your every whim. I paid for the down payment on this house you live in, the one you so frequently complain about the burden of. I paid for your endless string of luxury cars, your designer clothes, your exclusive club memberships. All to ensure you felt supported, loved, cherished. All to buy a semblance of your affection. Her gaze shifted to Serafina, her expression calm but penetrating. And you, Serafina. My sweet, ambitious daughter-in-law. Do you recall the 3 groundbreaking businesses you launched, each one a spectacular failure? The millions I invested, knowing deep down they were doomed, simply because you assured me they would bring you fulfillment and prestige, and perhaps, you might finally offer me a genuine smile? The endless shopping sprees, the exotic vacations to places you refused to invite me, the constant need for the latest luxury item? Each time, I hoped that by providing you with everything you desired, you would finally see me not as a bank, but as a mother, as a friend. You never did. You merely saw me as a means to maintain your opulent facade. Serafina's face contorted, a flicker of shame quickly replaced by defensive anger. This is ridiculous. We're your family. It's your duty to support us. We're your legacy. Duty? Elara's voice hardened, a steely edge entering her quiet tone. Was it my duty to pay for Oliver and Willow's elite private school tuition, which costs more than most university degrees? Their equestrian lessons, their music academies, their summer camps in Switzerland? Was it my duty to finance their trust funds, to ensure they would never have to work a day in their lives, perhaps denying them the very drive that made their grandfather successful? I did it because I loved them, because I loved you. I hoped that through my generosity, I would earn your love, your respect, your time. Instead, I earned your contempt. Your disdain. Your calls came only when your accounts were low, your lives too expensive to maintain on your own modest incomes. You have treated me not as a mother, but as a resource to be exploited, a nuisance to be tolerated until the next financial need arose. My every interaction with you became a transaction, a calculation of what I could provide. Kalen's face was ashen, his usual confident demeanor utterly shattered. Mother, you're being emotional. We love you. Of course we do. This is just a misunderstanding. We were just under a lot of pressure. We didn't mean to upset you about the surgery, we just thought you had other funds. You thought I had other funds? Elara cut him off, her voice laced with a bitter irony that stung the air. You suggested I use my pension. The very pension I had painstakingly saved, after having spent the vast majority of my inheritance on your luxurious lives, on your careers, on your children's upbringing. The pension that was supposed to sustain me in my old age, the one you so callously told me to deplete for a life-saving operation, for my very survival. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes blazing with a newfound, terrifying resolve. That, Kalen, was the moment I truly saw you. Both of you. You saw me not as a person, but as a wallet. As an obstacle to your continued indulgence. And in that moment, I realized my greatest mistake was not in giving you too much, but in expecting anything in return. In expecting love, or even common decency. In expecting you to see me as anything more than an endless well of money. Serafina, seeing their usual tactics failing, tried a different approach. Her voice softened, feigning concern, a desperate attempt to regain control. Mother, please, you're not well. This must be the stress of your condition. We can talk about this when you're feeling better. Let us help you get through this surgery, and then we can sort out this misunderstanding. We're worried about you. Elara's smile was chilling, utterly devoid of warmth, a stark reflection of their own coldness. Oh, I am perfectly well, Serafina. Clearer than I have been in years. And as for my surgery, you needn't worry. I have made my own arrangements. Arrangements that will, perhaps, surprise you. She paused, allowing the suspense to build, watching their faces, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. You see, when you so cruelly dismissed my plea for help, when you told me to use my pension, I did. But not for my surgery directly. I used it for something far more significant. Something that will, I believe, finally teach you the value of respect, of gratitude, and of consequences. Something that will ensure you learn to stand on your own 2 feet, as you should have learned long ago. She picked up a sleek, official-looking document from her desk, the crest of a prestigious legal firm emblazoned at the top. She held it up, allowing them to see the bold, official seal, the name of the institution printed clearly. As of this morning, she announced, her voice resonating with an unshakable power, I am the new majority owner of the Stullingwood Private Hospital. Kalen and Serafina stared, their mouths agape, their faces draining of all color. Stullingwood. The prestigious institution where Kalen was a celebrated lead surgeon, where Serafina held a lucrative, influential administrative position. Their professional lives, their social standing, their entire identities were inextricably linked to that hospital. It was the very foundation of their perceived success. You what? Kalen stammered, his voice a disbelieving whisper, his mind struggling to comprehend the magnitude of her words. I bought it, Elara repeated, her voice serene, almost melodic, enjoying the profound shock on their faces. Every single controlling share. And as the new owner, I will, of course, be making some significant changes. Starting at the very top, and extending throughout the administration and key departments. Performance reviews will be rigorous. And loyalty, true loyalty, will be paramount. She let the words hang in the air, their implications slowly, horrifyingly, dawning on her son and daughter-in-law. The silent understanding that their careers, their livelihoods, were now entirely at her mercy, was a far more potent weapon than any financial cut-off. Serafina's composure shattered completely. You can't. You can't do this. This is our lives. Our careers. You're trying to destroy us. You're ruining everything. Her voice rose to a hysterical shriek. Destroy you? Elara's voice was calm, almost pitying, a gentle correction. No, Serafina. I am merely ensuring that you stand on your own 2 feet for the first time in your lives. I am ensuring that your future, and indeed your present, is dictated by your own merit, not by the depth of my pockets. And I am ensuring that I finally receive the peace and respect I deserve. The respect you refused to give me when I offered you my love freely. I am simply rebalancing the scales. Kalen, his mind racing, tried to recover, his survival instincts kicking in. Mother, this is blackmail. This is emotional manipulation. We can sue you. This is unethical. This is a misuse of power. Elara simply smiled, a genuine, powerful smile that reached her eyes, a reflection of her newfound liberation. My lawyers, Kalen, are far more competent than yours. Every step has been meticulously legal, every transaction above board. And as for unethical? You taught me that lesson, my dear. You showed me that in your world, only power speaks. And now, I have it. She glanced at her elegant grandmother clock, the soft tick-tock a gentle reminder of the fleeting time. Your 20 minutes are up. I believe Mr. Henderson will show you out. We will, of course, be seeing each other at the hospital soon. I look forward to our professional relationship. Her gaze held a glint of anticipation, a promise of seismic shifts yet to come. Kalen and Serafina stumbled out of Elara's mansion, their minds reeling, their carefully constructed world having imploded around them. The drive home was silent, punctuated only by Serafina's ragged sobs and Kalen's frustrated mutters, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. The reality of Elara's actions, once a distant, unthinkable notion, now loomed over them, a monstrous, undeniable truth. The carefully maintained facade of their lives had collapsed, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. Upon reaching their opulent, yet now financially precarious, home, they immediately plunged into a frantic damage control exercise. Kalen, his hands shaking, called his legal team, demanding they find a loophole, a way to reverse Elara's acquisition. His lawyers, however, after several urgent calls, delivered the devastating news: Elara's purchase was ironclad. She had used her own funds, meticulously managed and legally invested. There was no fraud, no coercion, nothing to challenge. The Sterlingwood Private Hospital, a jewel in the city's medical crown, was now unequivocally Elara Vespers. The news hit Kalen like a physical blow, stripping him of his professional security and the status that had defined him. Serafina, meanwhile, was on the phone with her closest colleagues at the hospital, trying to gauge the internal fallout. The news had spread like wildfire. Whispers of the Vesper family saga, of Elara's astonishing move, rippled through the hospital's corridors like an electric current. There was a strange mix of shock, fear, and a morbid curiosity among the staff. Many had witnessed Kalen and Serafina's dismissive attitudes towards Elara over the years, their thinly veiled contempt for the woman who funded their extravagant lives. Now, the tables had turned with a seismic shift. Serafina could practically hear the schadenfreude in some voices, the barely concealed delight at their predicament. Her social standing, once unassailable, built on a foundation of inherited wealth and ostentatious display, was now the subject of scandalous gossip. Invitations to exclusive galas and charity events, once extended freely, had already begun to dry up. Their carefully cultivated network of influential friends, who had largely benefited from their generosity, largely funded by Elara, seemed to suddenly be too busy for their desperate calls. The immediate consequences were brutal. Kalen's luxury car was repossessed that very afternoon, towed unceremoniously from their driveway, a public symbol of their downfall. The children's school, firm about their unpaid tuition, had sent official notices of withdrawal, refusing to allow Oliver and Willow back until the substantial arrears were settled. Their house manager, their chef, their personal trainers, all had quit, their salaries abruptly halted, leaving the mansion a hollow shell. The credit cards, which had sustained their opulent lifestyle, remained stubbornly declined, leaving them unable to even buy groceries. They were trapped in a mansion they could no longer afford to maintain, surrounded by luxury they could no longer sustain, and facing a frighteningly uncertain future. The panic was real, raw, and suffocating. While Kaylin and Serafina descended into a vortex of despair and frantic scheming, Elara Vesper was experiencing something entirely new: liberation. After their departure, she had not lingered on their distress. Instead, she had felt a profound sense of lightness, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Her home, once filled with the ghosts of unfulfilled expectations, now felt truly her own. She had immediately called her best friend, Evelyn, a vivacious woman she hadn't seen nearly enough of in recent years, their friendship often curtailed by Elara's focus on her family's demands. "Evelyn, my dear," Elara had said, her voice filled with a genuine warmth Evelyn hadn't heard in years, a lightness that was deeply unfamiliar. "Are you free for lunch tomorrow? I have quite the story to tell you. And then, I think it's time we finally booked that cruise to the Norwegian fjords we always talked about. The one with the amazing opera performances." The next day, Elara met Evelyn, sharing her story with a quiet satisfaction, a serene smile gracing her lips. Evelyn, a wise and loyal confidant, listened with growing astonishment, then burst into delighted laughter. "Elara, you magnificent woman. It's about time. I always knew you had this strength in you, buried under all that misplaced generosity." For the first time, Elara truly smiled, a smile of genuine joy and relief, free from the burden of pretense. That afternoon, she visited the hospital. Not as a patient, but as its new owner. She walked through the gleaming corridors, her head held high, observing everything with a keen, proprietorial eye. She met with the bewildered board members, confirmed her intentions for the hospital's future, and subtly made it clear that a new era of accountability and meritocracy was dawning. The air crackled with anticipation, a mix of fear and excitement. She felt a surge of power, not the kind she had sought through giving, but the kind that came from asserting her own worth, from reclaiming her agency. Months had passed since that momentous day, and the world had dramatically realigned for the Vesper family. Elara Vesper, once the silent, benevolent financier, had blossomed into a woman of vibrant independence. Her heart, once burdened by unrequited love and silent resentment, now beat with a steady rhythm of purpose and self-fulfillment. She had undergone her life-saving surgery, not at Sterlingwood, but at another renowned facility she chose, ensuring her recovery was private and undisturbed by the drama she had orchestrated. Her recovery was swift, buoyed by a newfound zest for life and an absence of the emotional drain that had plagued her for decades. She had indeed taken that cruise to the Norwegian fjords with Evelyn, marveling at the majestic landscapes and enjoying lively conversations. This was followed by an art history tour of Italy, where she reconnected with her lifelong passion for Renaissance art, and a leisurely safari in Kenya, where the vast, untamed wilderness filled her with a sense of boundless possibility. She had rediscovered her passion for classical music, attending concerts and operas she had foregone for years due to her children's demanding schedules and their disinterest in such pursuits. She joined a book club, started taking pottery classes, finding unexpected joy in the tactile creation of something with her own hands, and even began quietly investing in local charities that focused on empowering women and children, seeing her wealth as a force for genuine good, not just a tool for familial appeasement. Her mansion, once a lonely symbol of her solitude, now buzzed with her own chosen activities and company. She entertained old friends, hosted cultural evenings, and found genuine joy in her golden years, free from the crushing weight of expectation and ingratitude. At Sterlingwood Private Hospital, a new era had indeed begun. Elara, as the new owner, had appointed a new CEO, a formidable woman known for her ethical leadership and sharp business acumen, a stark contrast to the previous, more complacent administration. While Kaylin Vesper remained a surgeon, his prestigious lead surgeon title had been quietly revoked, and his once unassailable position was now under constant scrutiny. He was subjected to the same rigorous performance reviews as any other employee, his every move watched, his past indiscretions, minor though they were in the grand scheme of things, but indicative of his privileged attitude, now surfacing in the new, merit-based environment. The pressure was immense, and he often found himself working longer hours, his once easy days replaced by a relentless grind. Serafina Vesper, after several uncomfortable meetings with the new management and facing a hostile work environment due to the public nature of the family scandal and her perceived unearned status, chose to resign. Her attempts to find a similar high-level position elsewhere were met with polite rejections, her reputation irrevocably tainted by the whispers of her family's drama and the collapse of her once luxurious lifestyle. The social circles she had once effortlessly navigated now seemed to have closed their doors to her. Kaylin and Serafina were forced to confront a reality they had meticulously avoided their entire lives: self-sufficiency. They had sold their mansion, moving into a much smaller, though still respectable, home in a less exclusive neighborhood. The luxury cars were gone, replaced by more modest vehicles. Their children, Oliver and Willow, now attended a public school, navigating the unfamiliar territory of a more diverse peer group, experiencing life without the constant deluge of designer clothes and exotic vacations. Kaylin worked longer hours, often taking on extra shifts to make ends meet, the burden of their new financial reality pressing down on him, forcing him to learn budgeting and responsibility for the first time. Serafina, after a period of bitter resentment and a struggle with her diminished status, eventually found a mid-level administrative job in a less prestigious organization, a far cry from her former standing. They were learning, slowly and painfully, the true cost of their parents' generosity and the value of a dollar earned through their own efforts. They rarely spoke of Alara, the subject too raw, too humiliating, too laden with the bitter taste of their own hubris. Alara, however, occasionally received updates from her trusted CEO at Stillingwood, brief reports on the hospital's performance, and, implicitly, on Kaylin's continued employment. She held no malice, no desire for their utter ruin. Her actions had been about reclaiming her own life, not about destroying theirs. She understood that they were merely experiencing the consequences of their choices, learning a difficult but necessary lesson. A quiet contentment settled over her, a deep satisfaction that she had finally chosen herself. The truth, as Alara had learned, was that true love and genuine respect could never be bought. They were earned through mutual understanding, shared experiences, and an honest acknowledgement of one another's worth. Generosity, when given without expectation but received with contempt, could only lead to bitterness. The greatest act of loyalty, she realized in her newfound freedom, was not to others who took without giving, but to oneself. It was about honoring one's own dignity, one's own needs, and one's own profound right to a life lived on one's own terms, free from the shackles of ungrateful dependency. If you found Alara's story of reclaiming her power satisfying, you'll find a trove of similar tales of justice and life lessons right here on our channel. Don't miss out on our next compelling narrative by subscribing and hitting that notification bell. And we want to hear from you. Have you ever faced such blatant ingratitude, or even betrayal, from those you've supported? What did you do? Did you find a way to reassert your boundaries? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. Your insights might just help someone else navigate their own challenges.